It's been a few months since I've talked about reasons why I've given up on Canada. There are a number of things that have been bothersome over the last few years, but they're all trending in a worse direction. I'm going to pick one just right now to talk about, and that is the rise in crime and violent crime across Canada. So, I've mentioned this before in prior videos, but crime and violent crime in this country has been rising for the last 10 years. I've heard arguments where people will say, well, sure, crime has gone up, but it's still lower than it was in the 1990s or lower than it was in the 1970s. Now, I understand those arguments, and I do understand that Canada is relatively safe. It's one of the safer countries when you look at the entire world. However, my concern is that the rates of crime and violent crime are still trending upwards, and our political leaders have seemingly no desire to improve that, to reverse that, and voters in Canada are completely apathetic to it. So Canada has had a liberal government. So the Liberal Party of Canada has been the governing party of Canada since 2015. Okay, Justin Trudeau was their old prime minister. Mark Carney is their new prime minister, but it's the same party. And over the last decade, crime and violent crime has skyrocketed, and it's still trending in that direction. Now, some of the policies that this government has made has directly caused an increase in crime. So, for example, I just read an article that over the last 10 years, so since the Liberal Party has been in power, Canada has approved the entry of almost 18,000 people from other countries who are holding criminal records. So those are people who have criminal records in their home countries, and the Canadian government has allowed 18,000 of those people in. Now, I know people may say, yeah, but maybe those crimes weren't severe, or maybe they were being accused of a crime and it was an unfair court system. I mean, there are reasons that could happen. But also, I just recently read another article, and this was the Canadian Border Services Agency reporting that almost 600 foreign nationals in Canada who have committed crime, who have been not only committed crime, but have been convicted of crimes in Canada. So these are people who are not Canadians. They're in Canada. They have committed serious crimes and have been convicted of those crimes. Almost 600 of them are completely missing. So they've been ordered to be deported, and Canadian Border Services Agency cannot find these people. Another thing is that the federal Liberal government has relaxed laws so that judges can give lighter sentences if they want to certain racial groups. And as a result of this, or an indirect result of this, we have seen, especially since 2023, an increase in hate crimes against Jewish people in Canada. And statistics say that this has become common all across Canada for Jewish people being the recipients of hate crimes. Interestingly, your immigration status in Canada, once again, because of the laws that our politicians have made, it makes it easier for somebody to get away with a crime. So, just an example, if you are a non-citizen in Canada and you commit a crime, a judge may reduce your sentence. And there are numerous examples of this in the courts in Canada where judges have granted leniency to non-Canadians for criminal offenses, and giving them, instead of sentencing them to jail time, are giving them discharge and probation instead, because judges explicitly said that they want to avoid a situation where these people get deported for committing a crime. So I'll leave it up to you whether you think that's right or not, whether a non-citizen in Canada who commits the same crime as a Canadian might be given less jail time and given parole because the judge feels it would be unfair to deport them back to their home country. But once again, our government is capable of writing these laws, and this is what our judges are doing with these laws. Repeat offending has become a significant problem in Canada. So a large proportion of crimes are committed by a small proportion of people who are arrested, then released again, and then they commit crimes, they're arrested again, and then they're released again, and that pattern just continues. And it's not just for people who are thieves or somebody with a mental illness attacking somebody else, or any scenarios that you can think of that may excuse that behavior. But just a few months ago, so this was in June of 2025, this happened in Ontario. There was a 5-time repeat impaired driving offender who was, in his most recent accident, caused a multi-vehicle crash. He caused life-altering injuries to people. He already had 3 separate lifetime driving prohibitions. So he didn't get jail time. Actually, he was allowed back out on bail. And the condition was that he doesn't drive while he's out on bail. So here's a repeat offender who has caused serious harm and changes to life to many, many people. Canada has also something called a Gladue law, and this is from 1999, but it's along the same vein of some of these other laws in Canada that give leniency to certain profiles of people. So, for example, so the Gladue law, judges in Canada are actually required by law to give an Indigenous criminal offender lighter sentences just for being Indigenous. So they're not required to give it to them, but they're required to consider lighter sentences and look for reasons to give lighter sentences for it. So reasons for this is because the Gladue law says that, Indigenous people in Canada are victims of racism and discrimination and multi-generational trauma. So they should have a lighter sentence. Now, I do agree that Indigenous people in Canada are victims of racism and discrimination and have multi-generational trauma. There's no dispute over that. However, everybody has been a victim of racism in some form or another, discrimination of some form or another, and not just Indigenous people. Also, multi-generational trauma isn't unique to Indigenous people either. Once again, Indigenous people have experienced multi-generational trauma, but so have many, many other people in Canada. For example, when I was a kid, I went to school with kids who were kids in refugee families. So they may have been from either oppressive governments or running from war. So this happened to in places like Poland and Ukraine, even former Yugoslavian states. People escaping war, that sort of thing. There were lots of racist jokes against Polish people and Ukrainian people and Slavic people. There was lots of discrimination against them for their language. There was multi-generational trauma with these people as well. They had parents and grandparents who suffered under wars and starvation situations and government imprisonment and all sorts of those things. They came to Canada to escape those things, but that multi-generational trauma is still there. However, if they're in front of a judge and being accused of a crime and they're considered a criminal offender, there's no law to give them lighter sentences due to that. So it's because they're not Indigenous. So if if they were Indigenous, then the judge would have to consider lighter sentences for them. So that's another issue that I have a bit of a problem in Canada with. It's this there isn't this blind justice for everybody. It's this tiered, segmented justice depending on who your parents were, whether you get certain treatment or not by our courts. I think it's shameful that Canadians pay such a high amount of what they earn to taxes, and there should be an expectation that you'll be safe from proven criminals when you're out in public. I think at bare minimum, as a person who pays almost 50% of your income to the government, there should be a bare minimum that the government can keep you safe. But at minimum, they're not doing that for us. Even in Canada, even in your own home, your safety is not guaranteed by the government. So in Canada, in August of 2025, which is when I'm recording this video, there was a case where it's been national news. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, an intruder broke into somebody's home. This intruder had a warrant out, so the police already knew of him, and the police were looking for him. Attacked that homeowner with a knife. That homeowner defended himself, grabbed his own kitchen knife, and defended himself against this attacker. Afterwards, the homeowner has been arrested and criminally charged for attacking that intruder in his home. Now, I know there's probably more to this story, but you do have a right to defend yourself in Canada. But that right has to be proportional to the attack. So if somebody attacks you with a knife, you basically can match that to defend yourself. So in Canada, you wouldn't be allowed to take out a gun and shoot that person with a knife because that's disproportional. If somebody attacks you with a fist, you're not allowed to pull a knife and protect yourself with a knife. That's kind of how the right to defend yourself works in Canada. Now, I know some people who saw this case and have heard about this case and maybe even listening to me talk about it will say, okay, but that's, there'll be a trial, and that person that homeowner will be able to defend himself and maybe get all the charges dropped or whatever. He'll be found not guilty. However, even if the homeowner who defended himself, even if he's found innocent in the court, he's still facing jail. He still has major disruptions to his life over and above being attacked at 3 o'clock in the morning by somebody breaking in. And also possibly thousands and thousands of dollars of legal defense fees. That's something that significantly interferes with your life. So what was the homeowner supposed to do when he was getting attacked at 3 o'clock in the morning in his own home? What was he supposed to do when getting assaulted? Was he supposed to pick up the phone, dial the police number, sit there and talk to him, go through the whole process of explaining what was going on and what the situation is, where he lives, all those things, what's happening to him, and then wait around for the police to show up while he's being attacked? Like that's insane. That's crazy to think about. So anyway, it's really kind of unfair, I think, how the justice system works, even for defense in your own home in Canada. And here's something else to consider. Think about the same individual. So this person who had a warrant and was assaulting somebody with a knife at 3 o'clock in the morning. If police were interacting with that person and that person was trying to attack an officer with a knife, the officer would be allowed to shoot him, and the police would have been justified in the shooting. So just consider that when you're thinking about whether a homeowner has a right to protect himself with a knife against an intruder attacking him with a knife. Once again, you may ask me, all right, Matt, well, you can always vote for somebody else who will promise to change these laws. And that's true. And I have, and I've participated in that process, and I respect that process. Okay, Canada has just had an election in April of 2025, and the same government was elected. So the Liberal government was re-elected. And I question whether this Liberal government cares about Canada's safety and the safety of Canadians. So just for an example, Canada's public safety minister, and I know I'm going to mispronounce his name, but it's Gary Anandansangari. Anandansangari, maybe that's it. Anyway, Canada's public safety minister. So this is the man who was elected, and he was appointed to be responsible for gun safety and gun regulations in Canada. So in Parliament, during an exchange, the public safety minister said that he did not know what the basic licenses were for Canadians to own guns. This is Canada's public safety minister. He should know the basic minimum about Canada's gun regulations. He also admitted that he never took the Canadian firearms safety course. He didn't actually know that there was a Canadian firearms safety course. And the thing is, everybody in Canada who wants to own a gun needs to take this course and pass this course in order to get a license to have the gun. The public safety minister, he also didn't know, he admitted this in Parliament, he also didn't know what a possession and acquisition license was, or what a restricted possession and acquisition license was. Okay, every gun owner in Canada knows what a PAL and an RPAL is. Even people who don't own guns, who have even looked into gun safety, that's the first thing on the government's webpage says that you need to have. Canada's public safety minister, in charge of enforcing gun laws and regulations, does not know that Canadians need a license to own a gun. So how much do they care about our safety? This public safety minister, by the way, also had to recuse himself from files related to 2 terrorist groups on Canada's terrorist list. And last year, he also wrote letters of support for immigration, for an immigration application for somebody who is a member of one of these 2 terrorist groups. So this is now he's been promoted to the Minister of Public Safety in Canada. So no matter what country you live in, can you imagine somebody that you voted for in your government that's supposed to represent your interests? Can you imagine that person writing letters of support for a suspected terrorist who wants to come into your country? It's really mind-boggling. You might be saying, well, that's just one person, but locally, this happened near where I live. A man in Surrey, BC, so that's a suburb of Vancouver, for those who don't know, was sentenced in a 2023 attack on a public transit bus where he pulled out a big knife and attempted to slit the throat of a passenger on a public transit bus. This man claims that he is part of the ISIS terrorist group. And in the news articles talking about his sentencing now, nobody even touches upon how he came into Canada or why he was allowed or what the circumstances were to let this scumbag into the country. But when you have, at the very highest levels of government in Canada, a public safety minister who needs to recuse himself from files because of they're talking about certain terrorist organizations, and also writing letters of support for suspected terrorists into the country to immigrate here, it speaks loud and clear to me that our government does not care about public safety. They may say so, but they don't act like it. And once again, be reminded, if you're a Canadian, you pay almost 50% of all of your money to the government, and you are relying on them to keep you safe. So what does Canada do to keep you safe? What are they doing to keep you safer than they did in 2015? Crime is on the rise. Violent crime's on the rise. This is just one reason why Canada is disappointing me, and I see it. I see the standard of living decaying, and it's decaying quite quickly, in my opinion.